This is the ratio and proportions notes for Broward College Health Sciences Bootcamp. So a ratio is a value which compares two quantities that are measured with the same unit. And if we compare A to B, then we'll write the ratio as A, and then the word to, and then B, so A to B. Or we could write it as a fraction, A over B, or we can write it with a symbol which looks like a colon in between the A and B, and that colon is read as the word to. So when you use different values, we'll convert before we can create a ratio, or different units will convert when before we make a ratio, which is covered in a later module. So most of the time, we're going to write the ratios as fractions, and we want to first review how to simplify fractions. So to simplify a fraction, we're going to multiply or divide both the top and bottom number by the same value. So that would be the numerator and denominator, you have to divide by the same value. So mainly, we're going to start with just small numbers. So if both values, both the numerator and denominator, are even, we might try dividing by 2. We could look to see if it's divisible by 3, divisible by 5. So we'll start with small values. So in example 1, we want to simplify the fraction. So the fraction is 18 over 4. Well, 18 and 4 are both even, so we can divide both of them by 2. So we'll do divided by 2, divided by 2. So now 18 divided by 2 is 9, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So now do 9 and 2 have any factors in common? Can they both be divided by the same value? No. 9 is odd, and 2 is even, and 2 is prime, which means 2 is only divisible by 2. And so we stop. This is our simplified fraction. So the ratio of 18 to 4 is the same as 9 to 2. Okay, let's try another one. 9 over 27. So both 9 and 27 are divisible by 3. So I'll divide 9 by 3, and I'll divide 27 by 3. That gives me 3 over, and then 27 divided by 3 is 9. Now if you look, those two numbers can be divided again by 3. So if you didn't see that they could both be divided by 9 right off the bat, you can still just divide by small prime values until you get two numbers that you recognize. So I'll divide the top by 3 and the bottom by 3. Now 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 9 divided by 3 is 3. So the simplified fraction of 9 over 27 can be written as 1 over 3. And what that means is if you were given the ratio 9 to 27, that would be the same as the ratio 1 to 3. Let's try it with a little bit larger numbers here. So let's look at 484 over 162. Now 484 is even and 162 is even. So my first thought is maybe to just divide these guys by 2 and see what happens. So I'll divide both the top and the bottom values by 2, and I'll get, 242 over 81. Now, 242 is even, but 81 is not, so I can't keep dividing by 2. I could try dividing by 3 because I know 81 is divisible by 3. But 242 is not divisible by 3. And if you're not sure, just try it over here. 242 divided by 3. So 3 doesn't go into 2, but it does go into 24 8 times. And 3 times 8 is 24. We'll subtract. That leaves 0. Bring down the 2, and this 2 is a remainder. So because 242 is not divisible by 3, and 3 is really the only prime number that's going to go into 81, we stop. This is our final answer, 242 to 81. Let's try one more, 13 over 50. So 13 over 50, 13 is a prime number, right? So 13 is prime, which means the only thing that I can divide 13 by is 13. So can I divide 50 by 13? I don't think so. Let's try it. So let's see, 13 times 2 would be 26. 13 times 3 would be 39. So I could go in 3 times, which would make 39. And when I subtract, that gives me 11. And this would be a remainder. So I can't divide 13 into 50. So my only choice was dividing by 13 because 13 is a prime number. And so I stopped. This is already simplified. So now let's start as writing the ratio in words and then change it to a fraction and then simplify. Excuse me. So 10 to 19 can be written as 10 to 19. Now 19 is a prime number, so its only choice is to divide by 19, but 10 is too small. I can't divide it by 19 without getting a decimal, so this is the simplified fraction. Let's try 45 to 9. Now it makes a difference which number goes where. So you're going to keep the first number on top and the second number on bottom, always. So 45 to 9. So now let's think, what numbers go into 45 and 9? Well, I know 9 is divisible by 3, and I think 45 is divisible by 3. If you're not sure, just do the math. So 3 goes into 4 one time. That makes 3. Subtract, bring down. 3 goes into 15 5 times, which makes 15. And there's no remainder. So 45 is indeed divisible by 3. So let's do that. We'll do divided by 3, divided by 3. So that would give me 45 divided by 3 is 15. 9 divided by 3 is 3. Well, I think I can do this again. Right? 15 and 3 are both divisible by 3. Now 3 is a prime number, so the only thing I could choose to divide by is itself, and I only do that if the top is also divisible by that value. So here, 15 divided by 3 is 5, and 3 divided by 3 is 1. So the simplified ratio would be 5 to 1. So we could write that as this fraction, or we could write 5 to 1. That would be the simplified ratio. Let's try 7 to 21. So 7 over 21. 7 is a prime number, so the only thing I could try to divide it by is itself. So is 21 also divisible by 7? Yeah, it is. So 7 divided by 7 is 1. 21 divided by 7 is 3. So 7 to 21 is the same ratio as 1 to 3. Let's try one more. 51 to 34. So let's write that as a fraction. Now, this one is a little tough because 51 looks like it's a prime number, but it is not. 51 is actually 17 times 3, and 34 is actually 17 times 2. So the prime number which goes into both of these values is going to be 17. So I'm going to divide both of these by 17. So now 17 times 3 makes 51. So 51 divided by 17 makes 3. And then 34 divided by 17 is 2. So the simplified ratio is 3 to 2. So now if a ratio has a decimal in it, we'll multiply each number by the same power of a 10 to eliminate the decimals, and then simplify if needed. So let's write this 6.4 to 0.8. Let's write that as a fraction first. Now, I don't like those decimals, so what I'm going to do before I try to simplify is, or make the numbers smaller, is I'm going to multiply both by 10. Now, why 10? Well, this top number has 1 decimal place. And this bottom number also has 1 decimal place. So before I try to get the numbers smaller, I'm going to technically make them bigger by multiplying by 10. Because 10 has 1 0, it will move the decimal 1 place to the right. So this would give me 64 over 8. Now again, if you did not know that 64 is divisible by 8, then you would say, hey, these are both even, let me divide by 2. And you would keep dividing until you couldn't divide by anything. So here, let's say you remember your times tables and you know that 64 is divisible by 8. So I'm going to divide both of them by 8. 64 divided by 8 is 8, and 8 divided by 8 is 1. So the simplified ratio would be 8 over 1 or 8 to 1. Either way you write it is fine. So remember, you could write it with the word 2, or you could write it with a colon. Let's try again. So let's try 1.26 to 4.2. So first let me just write them on top of each other, 1.26 over 4.2. Now, in this problem, this top number has 2 decimal places, or 2 digits after the decimal. But this guy down here only has 1 decimal place. Now, let's go back to these rules. I want to stress something to you. You have to multiply each number by the same power of 10. So what you're going to do is you're going to use the highest power of 10 that you need. So since the top has 2 decimal places, I'll multiply by 100, 1 with 2 zeros. And I'm going to do that to both top and bottom. Now on the top, it moves your decimal 2 places to the right, so it becomes 126. And on bottom, it also moves your decimal 2 places to the right, which means I'm going to have to tack on a 0. So that bottom becomes 420. And now, like a miracle, we don't have any decimals, so we can simplify our fraction. Now, 126 and 420, the first thing I see is that they're both even. So I'm going to divide by 2. That's my go-to. If they're both even, I just divide by 2. Until I get something which I can see probably from my multiplication tables that they are divisible by the same value. So 126 divided by 2 will be 63, and 420 divided by 2 will be 210. So now 63 is even. It's not prime though, right? 63 is divisible by 3. So I think 210 is divisible by 3, and if you're sure about it, go ahead and do it. But if you're not so sure about it, just try it. We're going to think, is 210 divisible by 3? I don't know. Let's try. So does 3 go into 210? Well, 3 doesn't go into 2, so okay. And then 3 does go into 21 7 times. And that makes 21. I subtract, I have 0. I bring down the 0. How many times does 3 go into 0? No times. And so that would give me 0, and I would subtract, and that's my remainder because there's nothing else to bring down. So 210 is in fact divisible by 3. So I'll divide both of these by 3. And that would give me 21 over 70. Okay, now we're at values which are from our multiplication chart. 21 and 7 are both divisible by 7. So I'm going to divide them both by 7. So 21 divided by 7 is 3, and 70 divided by 7 is 10. Now 3 is a prime number, so it's only divisible by 3. 10 is not divisible by 3, so I stop. This is my simplified fraction, 3 over 10. I could write that as 3 over 10, or I could write this as 3 to 10. Or I could write it as 3 to 10. Okay, let's try one more with decimals. 0.56 to 2.8. So I have 0.56 and 2.8. Now with the same logic, that top number has 2 decimal places, the bottom number has 1 decimal place. So we need 2 zeros, right, to multiply by. So we'll do 100. So we'll times by 100 on top, times by 100 on bottom. That will move my decimal 2 to the right, which will end up tacking a 0 on. So I have 56 over 280. Great, no decimals. Now I have to start dividing. Again, the first thing that I see is that these guys are both even, so I'm going to start by dividing by 2. And if you need to write it out, you can write it out. So 56 divided by 2 is 28. And 280 divided by 2 is 140. Those two guys, again, are both even, so I'm just going to divide by 2. 28 divided by 2 is 14. 140 divided by 2 is 70. Hey, those are both even. So both even, let's divide by 2. So 14 divided by 2 is 7, and 70 divided by 2 is 35. Okay, 7 is a prime number, which means that's my only choice to divide by. Is 35 divisible by 7? I think so. So I'll divide by 7. Well, 7 divided by 7 is 1. 35 divided by 7 is 5. So the ratio of 0.56 to 2.8 is the same as writing 1 to 5, or 1 to 5, or you can write it as a fraction, 1 over 5. Let's try a couple of applications. So find the patient's ratio of total cholesterol to HDL cholesterol using the given information. The total cholesterol is 185 mg over DL, and HDL cholesterol is 40 mg over DL. So we want total cholesterol to HDL cholesterol. So order matters here. The total cholesterol is 185 to the HDL cholesterol, which is 40. So let's go ahead and write that out. That would be 185 to 40. But now we need to simplify that. So I'm going to use it like a fraction. Now both 185 and 40 are divisible by 5. Because numbers that are divisible by 5 either end in a 5 or a 0. So let's see. Okay, so 185 divided by 5, let's see, that will be 7. So 17. And 40 divided by 5 is 8. (17 over 8). 17 is prime, and it shares nothing with 8. So the simplified ratio is 17 to 8. So I would write 17 to 8. You could also write the fraction, or you could write it with a colon. Okay, let's try another application. What is the strength, expressed as a ratio in lowest terms, of an 80 milliliter solution that contains 4 grams of lidocaine? Express the ratio as grams of lidocaine to milliliters of solution. So, how many grams of lidocaine was there? There were 4 grams. And how many milliliters of solution? 80 milliliters of solution. So here we would do 4 grams to 80 milliliters. Now I'm writing the units on this one because the units did not match. So now let's see if we can simplify this. Oh, I wrote 8. I need to write 80. 80. Okay, so let's write it as a fraction so we can try to simplify it. Now 4 is divisible by 2, but I know it's also divisible by 4, and so is 80. So I'm just going to do divisible by 4. So that would be 1 over 20. So the ratio would be 1 gram to 20 milliliters. Or you could write 1 to 20